Yeah, I'll sit.
All right, I'd like to call the Budget Review Committee to order. It's May 11th, 2023. It's 7 p.m. and we're in the Aldermatic Chamber. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman John Sullivan.
Here.
Alderman Ernest Jett.
Here.
Jettie. Alderman June Karen.
Here.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
I'm here.
Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire.
I'm here.
Alderman at Large Michael B. O'Brien is present, and our chairman, Alderman Richard A. Dowd.
Present.
You do have a quorum.
All right. And also in attendance?
Also in attendance, and not necessarily in the order that you will be appearing, will be Bill Mansfield, Radio Systems Manager, Bobby Bagley, Director of the Division of Public Health and Communications Services, Kim Bernard, Chief Public Health Nurse, Heidi P. Kukula, Manager of Health Officer, and Robert Mack, Manager / Welfare Officer, and Mr. Mario Andres, National School Superintendent.
Okay. First item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone that would like to provide any public comment on anything on the agenda this evening? Okay, seeing none. Communications.
We have one from Mr. Adam A. Marcoux, President of the National Teachers Union, in regards to support of R-23-117.
There being no objection, I'll accept the communication and place it on file. Did everyone get a copy? Okay, good. Unfinished business?
There is none.
Okay. New business resolutions.
Before us this evening is R-23-117, approving the cost items of a collective bargaining agreement between the Nashua Board of Education and the Nashua Teachers Union Local 1044 AFT AFL-CIO Unit B Para-Educators from July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2025, and related transfers. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the recommendation of final passage.
Okay, before we get to questions, we did receive a letter of recommendation on passing this from Adam Marcoux, President of the Teachers Union, and I believe Mr. Andre is here to discuss the contract. You want to just take a seat? If you could just give your name and address and an overview of the contract.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Mario Andre, Superintendent of Schools. So just a quick overview of the para contract. What you see before you is a 3-year contract covering school years 22 to 23, 23 to 24, 24 to 25. In year one, there's a base increase of 4%. With steps is 4.85. Year two, a 3.5% increase. With steps is 4.27. In year three, it's a 3.5% increase to the base, and with steps, 4.28. Additionally, any paraeducator substituting for a teacher will receive their rate of pay plus an increment. In the old contract, it was $6 for 30 minutes and up to $50 a day. In the new contract, it's $13 for the first 30 minutes and up to $65 for a full day. Additionally, staff working less than 30 hours a week will receive 2 additional personal days versus the 0 days before in the old contract. And they also can accumulate up to 25 days of sick time versus the 10 in the previous contract. That's a high-level overview, but I really want to thank the paraeducators and their union for working so collaboratively with the school administration and the BOE to finalize this deal. I know it took a little longer than expected, but we really respect what they do every day in the classroom for our students and our families and the adults throughout the building. So it was a great partnership, and I'm happy to present this before you tonight.
Could you just briefly define what the para's role is in education?
Yeah, so there's 3 types of para-educators in the district. There's one that serve our most intensive students in our intensive needs classroom. So they're working a lot one-on-one with our special education students, and that might be anything from toileting to discrete trials and really managing their behavior and their academics on a really close proximity. Again, on a one-to-one where one paraeducator is assigned to 1 or 2 students. And again, that's our neediest of children. We also have paraeducators who are instructional paras, and so they might be assigned to a grade level or a team, so they're working on still students' IEP goals or academic goals, behavior goals, but they're assigned to a more general population. So not as intense, but just as needed to make sure that students are succeeding academically in the least restrictive environment. And then we also have technology paraeducators, and they're helping our technology department or deploying devices or helping students access technology. So those are the 3 ranges, so really ranging from the most intense needs, and again, anything from toileting to discrete trials to really that assistance for students in our self-contained classes, to our instructional paras, which is more that academic that you might see them functioning and supporting students in our regular education classes, and then our technology paras.
So that first group is not required by federal law?
All 3 of them are, 2 out of the 3 are really dictated by students' IEPs. So it's a IEP decision, and depending on the intensity of the student's needs, that would dictate the level of support. And it's really about what does the student need, and we want that student to have access and opportunity to the curriculum in the least restrictive environment. A one-on-one paraeducational is sometimes more restrictive. That means that the student needs a little more help. And I say restrictive is just, you have someone much closer, and sorry if I'm leaning over, someone much closer to you than, than someone who's waiting and a little more in a passive role, making sure that you have enough level of academic struggle before they're helping you, as opposed to someone who might have to manually help you manipulate your academics, whether it's hand over hand or helping you with manipulatives or, again, toileting.
And the other thing you mentioned briefly in your first statement was, before, many times paras, because of absences, have to take over the teaching of the class. And before, they were never paid for a full day, even though they're acting as a substitute teacher. So now they're getting paid as a substitute, is that correct?
Just a clarification. So in the old contract, we increased the rates. So for the first 30 minutes, it was $6 for the first 30 minutes, and now it's up to $13. And then if they were a full day substitute, it's their base plus $50 in the old contract. Now it's their base plus $65. So we just increased the rates.
All right, thank you. Questions for the superintendent? Alderman O'Brien?
Well, I'll yield to Alderman Sullivan.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you, Alderman O'Brien. My questions are around staffing. My eyes were opened a little bit when I reviewed this, that there were so many paras in the district. 404. Are we fully staffed at this time?
We are not. So we have about 50 plus or minus maybe 5 or 10. So we range between 50 and 70 vacancies currently. And again, so because a lot of these supports are dictated by students' IEP, which becomes like a federal regulation at that point that we have to comply, we do contract with agencies, outside agencies, to bring in additional people to fill that support until we can hire internally.
Follow-up?
Follow-up?
How does that work when we outsource? Are we beholden to their rate of pay, or do
Yes.
they have to? We are?
Yeah.
Okay. How does that compare to what our paras make, more or less?
So their hourly rate is higher, but we do not pay their any kind of benefits,
Okay,
so.
got it. One more, please.
Follow up?
Thank
Okay.
you. This contract, from what I understand, I know a few paras in my ward. This was a long gap
Yeah.
on this. High level, what was the holdup?
Rate of pay, what was the percentage increase, and a couple, mostly the rate of pay. We're also looking at, one of the things we were hoping to do was actually increase the base level of pay, the incoming paras. And so there was a lot of conversation on where does the money go? Was it in the first couple of years or the top step? And so we came to a good compromise to move forward.
Okay. Well, congratulations on getting it done.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Anything else? Anyone else?
Uh,
Oh, Alderman O'Brien.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Andre, just to let you know that I am going to support this, very happy to. But what I wanted to let you know that my wife was a para at the Broad Street Preschool for approximately 18 years. I think half the city learned toilet training from my wife, which is very key. She does not want any complaints, you know what I mean, from her, But however, a lot of things that that the teacher had to work on, like they say, IEPs, individuals. This would not be done if it wasn't for the para. The individual one-on-one or collectively with the group and everything. And like I said, she loved her job, did it for 18 years, and I'm gonna definitely support this. Unfortunately, when Brian McCarthy was alive, his wife was a para. Both him and I could not support the contract because there's some silly rule that says that our wives worked at that, even though the paras were the least paid in the city docket. So I'm glad that we have taken care of them. They do a fine job.
If I may,
Yes.
I was a special educator for years, and I worked in first, residential schools and then self-contained rooms. So I always had a para-educator in my classroom. So I know firsthand how important they are for the instruction and the supports for students. So again, I see their value in it. They really taught me a lot on how to be a good teacher and a good administrator and how we need to support everybody in the district. So I agree with you, we wouldn't be able to function without our paras, our secretaries, our custodians. So I'm really happy that we were able to come to an agreement and present it to you tonight.
Any additional questions? Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. So I fully support the increasing the pay for the para-educators. I understand that they do a great job for little pay, but I noticed that the overall cost is going to be 4.8% in the first year, 4.3 and 4.3 in subsequent years. And the mayor told us that the school budget was coming in at 3% increase. So how are you gonna have enough money to pay this? How is that gonna happen?
Yes, so we budgeted to make sure that all of our educators were supported and then really making conscious decisions on other areas around our supplies or to consolidate, to make sure that we were having savings, not to our human capital or our direct supports to students. So Mr. Donovan, the rest of the administration, the building and principals really sharpened their pencils this year to make sure that we had a tight budget coming before you in a couple weeks. So this contract will be supported with our budget request.
Okay, good, thank you.
Any other questions? And we have everyone here tonight, so we don't have to do a roll call.
Correct.
Motion on the floor is to approve the Paris contract. It's resolution R 23-125. I'm sorry, 120.
Yeah, we could approve that.
That'll be a little later, but yes.
I'm sorry, 117. R 117. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. See you tomorrow. Okay, new business,
New business ordinances, there are none.
tabled in committee.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion to remove from the table R-23-125, which is relative to the adoption of the fiscal year 2024 proposed budget for the city of Nashua, general, enterprise, special revenue, and grant funds.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to remove from the table the budget R 23-125. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, this evening, we're going to cover citywide communications. It's on page 116 in your new books. And public health and community services, it's on page 125. The department numbers are listed in the left-hand column on your agenda. So the first item is citywide communications, and I believe Mr. Mansfield is here to shed some light. We go back a few years, don't we? So when you start with your name and address, and would you give an overview of what citywide communications is, what it covers, and responsibilities?
My name is Bill Mansfield. I'm the radio systems manager for the city of Nashua. I'm going to give you a brief overview of what we do and what we're responsible for. The mission of the communications division is to provide radio communications and support services to emergency and non-emergency city services in a manner that enables all entities to perform their mission and to keep our community safe and enhance the quality of life. The communications division consists of two people, myself and another gentleman. These two employees are responsible for maintaining the city's radio network that encompasses 5 different facilities, a microwave network system that connects 4 different tower facilities together, over 50 base stations, nearly 2,000 mobile and portable radios, as well as their accessories. And these are all assigned to every department within the city. We also maintain numerous servers, switchers, routers, firewalls, and desktop computers. We maintain hundreds of different software packages that are included in the infrastructure of the radio system, 6 dispatch consoles between police and fire, 3 generators, large power stations, HVAC units at each of the facilities, and provide pest control as well as we remove our own snow from the sites. The department is responsible for coordinating and working with the mayor's office, legal department, planning department to manage contracts for additional, for the 6 city-owned cell towers. We also prepare and present budgets, proposals, purchase replacement equipment, manage several projects at one time, constantly try to learn new technology that is released in our equipment on a quarterly basis. In our spare time, we respond to alarms generated by the radio infrastructure that may take up to hours to troubleshoot and repair. Today was a perfect example. Got in this morning, an alarm on the system. We're still working on that at this point in time. We put it off till tomorrow morning. There were 3 of us working on it, and there was only 2 employees. It's a very complex system. We assist all the other city departments with repairs, replacement, and configuration of the radio equipment. We maintain the radio templates within the radios. We make the radio templates within the radios. We reprogram the radios to keep up with the ever-changing radio frequency changes that happen, especially with mutual aid coming into the city We have to make sure that the radio frequencies are the same so that we can communicate with each other. We uninstall radios from retired vehicles within the city. We reprogram and schedule reinstallations into these vehicles. We train personnel on the proper operation of the radio equipment. We manage upgrades of radio equipment and infrastructure and ensure that we respond to the service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We are responsible for the entire radio system 365 days a year. Over the years, technology has changed dramatically, and now every device is a computer. With technology changes, there is also opportunities to improve the safety of our city employees as well as the community as a whole. Over the past couple of years, the city began requiring that all construction within the city be tested and ensure that radio communications meet the standards set forth by the NFPA, National Fire Protection Agency. I believe that's what it stands for.
Yes.
So due to the increase in the building construction in the city and the remodeling of facilities, more and more of these facilities are being required to install what we call bidirectional amplifiers. These bidirectional amplifiers improve the communications from within the building, transmitted out of the building to our tower sites, which improves basically the radio communications in general, especially for the firefighters that are operating within those buildings. These are expensive units. We're working on a plan right now. It's being drafted between the Fire Marshal's Office and the Communications Division to have procedures in place and guidelines in place for the contractors to ensure that they have the proper equipment installed in these buildings, tested, and then to ensure that we, as a city, go in and test those and confirm that the equipment is operating the way it's supposed to be. Other projects that we're partnering with in the fire department are the installation of station alerting at each of the fire stations. It's called Purvis. The station alerting works with the radio system, fire dispatch, and also the city's fiber network. Along with this, we will be implementing new accountability software into each of the fire radios that allows for roll call of all fire personnel at a fire scene to ensure that they are safe and accounted for throughout the fire. The city will also be installing a new Opticon system into the traffic lights to improve the flow of traffic during fire apparatus response to emergency calls. With all the new technology in the communications department doesn't have the resources available to assist with the implementation of all this new technology. Especially since we're in the process of preparing new equipment today for deployment to police department and fire department employees that probably will not be dispersed until late July, early August. Each and every one of the personnel will need to be trained on this new equipment on all 3 shifts. In this year's budget, we requested $65,000 to hire a part-time employee to assist with the overseeing and implementing some of the new technology for the fire department. There appears to be an error in the book that you have, because I received it later on this afternoon. In the part-time wages, it states, my proposed budget was $149,360. In that, on your
Do you have a
sheets.
page or a number?
Excuse me?
122.
Can you give us the page and the number where it's?
I have no idea. I don't
122.
Say it
I don't
again.
have the book. I only received
122.
a slip. So under part-time wages, the request was for $149,360. And the mayor's proposed budget is $117,360, which is a reduction of $32,000.
Could you repeat what your request was?
My request was $149,360.
Thank you.
Also in the budget, there seems to be another error where we had requested $10,000 in the stipend line. And again, I don't know what line that is.
51700, page 123.
We requested $10,000 for the stipend, and it was reduced to $6,000 by the mayor. Due to the number of projects that we have going on right now, and the amount of work impending this year, these are the reasons why we have requested these particular increases. We will be looking to hire for a specific person for this part-time position. This person has to have institutional knowledge of the fire department, its fire hoses, its fire procedures, the city's fiber network, the city's current opticom system, and knowledge of the radio communications itself. The only person that could fill this would need to be someone that is within the fire department or retiring from the fire department. The line item cut for this employee would hinder our ability to hire someone to fulfill this position. And I'm asking that the Budget Committee reinstate the original amount that was requested so that we can possibly hire somebody for this position. The person being hired for this position, there's already been a job description made up. The job description encompasses everything that I spoke of for the opticom system, the new accountability software, the installation of the Purvis system. So it encompasses all that, as well as eventually, and probably in their spare time, they could help out with the fire dispatch, computer-aided dispatch that is there as well, and working on specific radio issues on a daily basis. Eventually, this may assist the fire department in gaining a full-time position to assist with all of their IT needs as recommended by the fire department's master plan study. And Chief Buxton's here today. If you had questions regarding that study, he's more into what that is. The communications department will also be implementing new encryption this year for the police department to meet federal standards, adding a server to maintain encryption keys in the system, and we will be implementing location services as well for each of the police officers. This will basically allow the dispatchers to see where the officer is if a panic button is activated and he doesn't have a chance to get to his radio to call for help. Along with training and implementing all of this equipment for fire and police personnel, we will also be required to install major updates to all the mobile radios within the city. Again, to basically for the accountability software as well as the new encryption software, which is very time consuming. This year in the budget, we've also added a revenue account. That particular account, I don't have the page number on it.
122.
122. The revenue account is to cover some of the costs of the system upgrade agreement that we have with Motorola Solutions. That revenue would be coming from the town of Merrimack. The town of Merrimack has 2 of their dispatch consoles tied into our radio system so they can have communications. And they're basically paying for their part of that SUA. So that's what that revenue is that is there. Trying to think what else we have here. The last thing I wanted to bring up is I'll be coming before the Board of Aldermen at some point during FY 2024, basically to replace the power systems that are at the police department and fire department. These power systems are battery backup systems. They're UPSs. They're very large UPSs. That's why I call them power systems. They're due for replacement. Matter of fact, the batteries in those are overdue. There are 60 batteries in the system. The batteries are car-sized batteries. Matter of fact, they're a little bit larger than car size. And they're very expensive to replace. We're looking at changing the type of battery that we're going to be putting in these, changing the UPS systems because they're overdue for replacement, and try to save the city money over the next 20 years by installing pretty much 20-year batteries instead of 3-year batteries like what we have today. So that would be coming in the future. That's not part of the budget, but I did want to bring that up.
Thank you. Yeah, the other piece was that 2 or 3 years ago, we added that second person to your group because we realized with the knowledge you have of the programming and everything else on those radios, if you ever get hit by a bus, there's a lot of buses around the police station, that we would be in serious, serious trouble. So we added that second person. But the technology and the workload is increasing exponentially, and it's extremely important to all of the divisions. So, questions? Oh, yes, Alderman Kelly.
I had a couple of clarifications, if I could. So you said that you were looking for 65,000 to hire that part-time employee.
Correct.
The difference between what you said your proposed was is only 32. Are we only covering half the year there?
So no, the entire proposal was 149,000, let me just double check the number here. So so there's already a part-time employee, that is myself.
Yep.
And then the total cost would be, basically, the mayor cut
2,000.
2,000 out
Yep.
of that, so 32,000 plus the remainder of what is in that so if you add that 117 to the 32, that would pretty much come up to the 65. So if you,
Okay, so some of
So
it
if-
was in there, is what you're saying,
some of it is in there, yes.
but not all of it. Okay,
I think there's 32 in there,
that is what I was
and I
asking.
think 33 is, or it's vice versa, 32 or 33,000.
Okay, so your proposed requested 149,360 includes the full 65 for that
Correct.
part-time employee. Okay.
Correct.
Second clarification I had, if I could.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure I'm clarifying. So you said that there was 4,000 more in your stipend request, so I added that. My understanding is that makes your proposed departmental budget should be up 36,000. Does
Correct.
that sound right? So that would be, just for everybody, page 124, the total department proposed would be 747,346. Just want to make sure we had that. Those are my clarifications. I probably have actual questions, but I want to make sure those were good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman O'Brien?
Yeah, I'm going to offer some form of clarification, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Coming up within the fire service, I mean, gone are the days where somebody's working on the street boxes and stuff like that, but the fire department has been instrumental in working and installing the fiber optic system within the city and different things like that, and we really benefit with this. But what has happened, technology, as everybody knows that's in the business, has moved on. You know, it comes and it goes. You can't even buy a gateway computer anymore or anything else like that. And to have somebody fill this particular position at the money that you are quoting, I don't think, you know, this sounds almost like a bargain-based deal. And this person is just add water and mix, and he's ready to go, right from the first day of the job. So I'm going to offer support on this. The technology today mandates it. Unfortunately, there's no other way around it. They need somebody to make this system kind of operable. So, and what happens when it fails? You got to keep in mind, when the system fails, you know, fires don't stop or medical calls don't stop or anything else like that. So it's relatively important to the integral to the emergency services that are provided. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I'm going to go with Alderman Jettie and then come back to you.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. So I apologize. I appreciate Alderwoman Kelly's wanting to clarify, but I didn't quite catch the clarification. So, what I'm showing is under wages part-time, that you're requesting 117,360, and you're correcting that. You want to increase that by how much?
So my original number that I had submitted was, get back to my notes here,
149,960.
149,360.
Could I offer?
Can you clarify, answer the question?
Sure, I think I can, but let me just I don't wanna speak for, Mr. Mansfield there. So what I asked was he has asked for 65,000, but the difference in what he requested was only 32,000. So what he told me was the other part was already in there, but not the full, the 32 gets us to the full 65 that he wants. Does that make sense?
Whoa, no.
So a portion of it was in there, but not all of it.
Correct.
So can anyone tell me what the correct part-time wages, part-time number should be?
149,360 is what the department
Say
requested.
that again?
$149,360 on 51200.
Okay, 149,360.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And I have another
Follow-up
question.
question?
So when you talked about, forgive my ignorance, but when you talked, it sounded like there was a transmitter in buildings so the fire department can communicate with headquarters, I assume. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, so, the NFPA came up with a standard, a few years back, which is put into the building code, that mandates that there has to be a certain quality of communications, and there's a dB level, decibel level, that it has to be set at. It can't be any worse than that decibel level. I believe in the city of Nashville with our radio system, it's neg 79. That the level has to be met in every part of the building. So anybody who's having new construction, whether it be commercial or apartment buildings, not homes, but multi residential facilities, they're required to hire a company to come in and conduct testing to ensure that once that building is built, and they do it right towards the end of construction before the ceilings are put in, they'll go in, they'll hire a company, and they'll do testing throughout the entire building. If any part of that building fails that neg 79 decibel, then they're required to put an antenna system in the building, wherever the dead spots are, and put what they call a bidirectional amplifier. It's a radio unit, and then it gets transmitted off of an antenna on the roof.
Okay, and that's at their expense?
That is at their expense.
Okay.
The part that it becomes the city's expense is when we have to go out and inspect that to make sure it's done. And then on top of that, they're required by the NFPA standard to have that unit maintained every year. So now we have to keep up with all the paperwork to make sure that they have a maintenance contract in place to ensure that that system's gonna be operational all the time.
Okay, and for that inspection and those, annual inspections, do we charge for that? Do they pay for that?
So right now, there's nothing set in place. We're working on a draft policy for that. Right now, usually I go out, or my partner goes out with the fire marshal's office when they're doing their final inspection, and we work together and test out the system to ensure that it's operating properly. So right now, there's no charge for that, but eventually, once we come before the Board of Aldermen with a new draft proposal, we want a permitting process so that at least the city can recoup some of the funds.
Good, glad to hear that. And my last
Follow-up?
question, when you talked about batteries for the police and at least the police department, also the fire department, you said car-sized batteries. Are you talking about 12-volt batteries, or are you talking about EV-type batteries?
They're actually marine batteries. They're 12-volt batteries, but I actually have pictures.
That's okay, you're talking about fairly small,
I'm talking about batteries that are about this big.
okay. As
And I'm
opposed
getting
to
too old to lift them.
As opposed to an EV battery, which.
For electric vehicles?
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
The same batteries that are in your remote units near the towers? Those batteries are pretty good size.
Those are what we want to replace the system with. We want to have that system
Okay.
in the police and fire department, because those are 20-year batteries.
Yep.
and I won't be here in 20 years.
Alderman Sullivan, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much. You get to benefit from the fact that this is the first time we've looked at this budget book, so I'm all over this thing trying to figure it out. So I'm gonna go back to the clarifications laid out by Alderwoman Kelly and then Alderman Jettie, because I want to make sure that I have the number correct. In the book, your total appropriation for FY '24 should be $743,346.
No, it should be 747,346.
Okay.
You may be missing
The 4,000.
the $4,000 out of the stipend line.
Oh, the stipend.
Yep.
Could you repeat that one more time? 747,
346.
346, thank you. So of that, now, let's see, $143,000 delta between last year and this year. What goes into that? What's making up that 143,000? It's the part-time employee, which you currently do not have.
Correct.
Okay, and that is how much?
65,000.
65 of the 143. Okay, and do you know off, and then the other 4,000 is the stipend add-on,
Correct.
right? Okay, so now I'm at 69,000. So what is the balance? What's the balance of that delta? Is it just,
So some of
Overall.
it is going to be part of the fringe benefits package.
okay,
That's going to be part of it. I cannot calculate that, because I don't know how they calculate it, so.
okay. I'm just trying to get the big chunks here.
Matter of fact, if you give me 1 second, I can tell you. A lot of it is the, part of the maintenance contracts.
Uh-huh,
You can subtract 12 out of that, 12, whatever that number is.
okay,
For that. There's increase in the training costs because of the additional employee may need that training.
yep.
Trying to think. It's like
And you have one full-time employee or two?
one full-time, one part-time currently.
Okay, so now you're gonna have two part-time, one full-time.
Correct.
Okay.
All set?
Yep,
Yes, Alderwoman Kelly.
Thank you, and thank you to Alderman Sullivan, because that was actually one of my questions. So I know you said that the line was incorrect in the salary line, but does the fringe benefits account for that part-time employees?
So the fringe benefits would only account for that $33,000 portion of that part-time employee's salary. So the fringe benefits would end up going up. Although, and that would be,
So it's wrong as
and
well.
that's still, the final number, that's 747,346. That includes the full benefits of that $65,000 part-time employee.
Okay.
Because this is the actual document that that was submitted for the budget. So it was done by finance and everything else, so.
Can I just ask a clarifying question there? So
Sure.
in that document that you were referencing, that 51,340, that is the correct number under 52300?
52300, yes, 51,340.
I just wanted to make sure if they
Yes,
didn't accommodate that was correct there.
correct.
Right, so I have a few questions, if I could. Question number one, I'm gonna go away from our $65,000 part-time employee for a moment. I was a little bit interested in this Merrimack, revenue stream. It's something that we haven't done before, is that true?
Correct.
And how do we calculate what their cost to, or what that cost is to us?
I didn't calculate, so the cost is basically, it was done by Motorola because they're the ones who do the contracts. The problem is if, it was calculated by them, let me just put it that way. Because they calculate by console, there's 2 consoles over there. They calculate by console, so everything's calculated by a base station, a switch. There's so many different things, firewalls. Everything has a number to it. They're dealing with just two consoles. They don't deal with the other infrastructure portion of this. Eventually, to go further into your question, that's probably gonna answer a little more, is eventually the town of Merrimack is going to be charged for usage of our radio system, which would be another revenue charge, which would not go towards, so on top of the revenue, they would also be paying the maintenance fee.
That was gonna be my question.
Yes.
Cause
So that is coming in time.
okay, that was literally going to be my question. Is there any staffing or maintenance that's not being covered? Sounds like we're just covering hardware in that 12,000.
Correct.
But you're going to be adding on maintenance and
Yes.
all of that in the future.
Yes.
Is there a reason why we're not doing it now?
So because they're not totally using our system,
Okay,
just the consoles are really using it.
okay,
They're still operating on their own VHF radio system at this point in time. But they had the money at the time, so we just had them connected at that time, so.
okay. And now I'm gonna go back to the part-time employee if I could. So, you said a lot of things about the description of the type of person that this needs to be. It sounded pretty specialized. Are you pretty confident that you can hire that person in the next year? Do
Yes,
you have someone in mind?
yes.
Awesome, great. Love to hear it. And I already answered the fringe benefits, so I'm good, thank you.
Yes, Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Just, I don't know if it's a point of order or whatnot, but if we were to vote on this budget as it's printed in here, then Mr. Mansfield would not get the appropriation that he would want. Should we get a corrected sheet with the numbers that he stated? Because the numbers I have, if I voted yes on this budget, he would be appropriated 711,000. He's asking for 747, 346. I don't want to shortchange his department.
I think you'll find that throughout the budget book and the divisions. The mayor talks to the different divisions and makes cuts. And the cuts can either stay or be put back in. But what we have in the book is what the mayor has authorized. To add something, when we do our wrap-up sessions, members of the budget committee can make motions to add or subtract from the budget. So that would change the number, but at that time.
But if you look at fiscal year 2024, department proposed, it says 711,346. Fiscal year mayor proposed, same number. Not the 747,346 that Mr. Mansfield had corrected. My concern is, if we say yes to this budget, are we saying yes to this number? Apparently there were errors. Or somebody left something out, or whatever. I just don't want the department to be changed $50,000.
So I believe you came to an agreement with the mayor on the budget, but you would ask for more?
No, we had not, we had a discussion, and basically they called me on Monday and said that they were cutting money out of the budget, that's all they said.
So the
So my
budget book should say that you asked for this, the mayor cut that.
Correct.
So we'll have to talk to Mr. Griffin about fixing that.
Okay.
Alderwoman Kelly?
And excuse me if I missed it, but I was wondering if when we go to have our discussions, if we could get a description of that part-time employee. I don't see it anywhere in your goals, of bringing that part-time employee on, so I just wanna make sure I have that information when we go to discuss
Would you
it.
like the job description?
I would love that if you could send it to Donna, she can share it with all of us.
I
Right.
can do that.
Thank you.
I see Alderman Jettie.
Yeah, so is Merrimack the only town that's benefiting from our radio system?
Yes.
Okay.
And Alderman Jettie, if you just pull your microphone, I think the people are having a hard time. Okay. so-
I'm having a hard time hearing other people, and I'm an
Yeah.
offender. I'm sorry.
I know. So any other questions for Mr. Mansfield? Are there any questions for Chief Buxton? Since he's here. No? Alderwoman Kelly?
Since he came out, I would love to hear his thoughts on this, a part-time employee, and how it would benefit the department.
Chief Buxton, would you like to add the importance to this position that, as far as the fire department's concerned?
Steve Buxton, Nashua Fire. I think Mr. Mansfield did a great job describing all of the duties that we're looking to encumber in this position. Currently, there is nobody catching this ball in our organization. It's a shortfall in our area. The master plan that we did identified this weakness for us. It is one of the recommendations. I think it's number 5, 6, or 7 in the recommendation list of the 40 or so things that they requested we work towards accomplishing. And as you know, we've slowly been pecking away at them, and this is our first step into the IT world. I will tell you, all of the products that we use now come with a software license that we hire firefighters, and we do very well there. But IT is not our strong suit, and we need somebody watching that in our organization, formulating a management plan for our IT, and also watching for our vulnerabilities in that area, so.
Alderwoman Kelly?
Don't you wish I was on Zoom tonight? Just kidding. Thank you for that explanation. If it's not too much, if you could re-forward your master plan recommendations, it would just be nice to have it at the top of inbox.
Certainly.
Thank you. Donna, close.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Not for the chief, but for the chair. The mayor discussed last night, Alderwoman Kelly made me think of it. We discussed last night a contingency budget about an information security officer position, perhaps. When do we hear about that? Because I heard what the chief said, and I heard software, and got
I
concerned.
believe, I could be wrong, because I'm not in the day-to-day communications with the mayor on this stuff, but I believe that they're waiting for the recommendations from that private company, without getting into too much detail.
Okay,
And I think that there is going to be a move to strengthen the IT structure in the city. So this could end up being part of that, so.
okay,
Maybe.
great, thanks.
Any other questions? Thanks, Chief. All right, no other questions?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We haven't voted yet.
Got a lot of questions because it's in the.
Okay. All right, so that's citywide communications. Just to reiterate, as we go through all these budgets, you may be coming up with questions, additions, deletions that you want to suggest add to the budget. At the wrap-up sessions, that's when it gets factored in, and the wrap-up sessions are after the public hearing on the budget. So that's when we make changes, and when the budget committee is done with their recommendations, then it goes to the full board to vote on the overall budget, and if it's passed, that's the budget. Yes, Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Just to refresh my memory, when the time comes for budget edits, do we add a whole line? Do we delete a whole line? Is it binary, all or nothing? Or can you kind of reduce it by 50%? Can you refresh my memory on that?
If the line is already in the budget,
Yeah,
you can make a motion to increase or decrease that line.
okay,
And if you're adding a new line, which means there's something new that's not in the budget, then that would be, you'd be able to do that as well. It just one, you need 2/3 majority at the Board of Aldermen to increase the mayor's budget. You only need 8 votes if we're decreasing or keeping it the same, so.
okay, all right, thanks.
Yes, Alderman Karen?
Thank you. I'm new to this. But as Alderman Sullivan was stating during Mr. Mansfield's conversation, I just happened to look at the next group that's coming on, and their department proposed budget is actually the same as what the mayor is proposing. So I think we really need clarification as to how much money they actually asked for. Not the same, it shouldn't be the same, it shouldn't be reading the same, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, right. The previous years, the budget book said, the department came in and asked for this.
Right,
The mayor allowed them this. And
Right.
that's not in there, and that's probably because of that new software we're using.
okay,
But I'm gonna talk to Mr. Griffin about making sure we know what the departments asked for and what was taken out. Because I believe Director Bagley's
Shaking her
indicating
head.
that something came out of her budget as well.
okay. I think that would be helpful for the committee to
So-
understand.
I think from a presentation standpoint, they can tell us now, but we'll see what we can do about getting those numbers. Yes?
Thank you.
I would expect they'd have to rerun this whole thing. I mean, because that's probably throughout the whole budget, right?
I'm not familiar with their software, so I'll talk to them tomorrow.
Okay.
I know they were striving to get this printed, so.
Yeah.
All right, the next item we're going to discuss is Public Health and Community Services. Director Bagley, would you like to bring your people up and fill in any occupied seats? Or unoccupied seats? So, Director Bagley, if you would give us an overview, introduce your staff, and then give us an overview of your budget, and then bring in your people as you'd like.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is Bobby Bagley, Director for the Division of Public Health and Community Services, and we're here to present the overall budget for the division. And we will do that by presenting each department, and each of the department heads will speak specifically to their budgets. Our Division of Public Health and Community Services serves as the Chief Public Health Strategist for our city of Nashua and for the Greater Nashua Public Health Region. Our division is the only accredited health department in the state of New Hampshire, and we've also gone up for reaccreditation, and so we're waiting to hear back from our national association with regards to that. The division as a whole provides a wide range of services, as you hear from each of the departments, and it's really important for us to be able to maintain our staffing as well as our budget lines to be able to meet the overall mission of our division, which is to promote, protect, and preserve the health and the well-being of the Greater Nashua region. So I will start with the Community Services Department. And the way that this is presented is a little different than what we're used to, so, and we also don't have the same page numbers that you all have. So I'm assuming that you have page, I have page 5 on my page for the division. Do you have page 125?
126.
Oh, you have 126.
Well, it starts on 125.
125 is your description.
Okay, and so 126 is the Community Services Department.
Right.
So on 127 is where we have the appropriation details for each of the lines. And for Community Services Department, the budget did come in at what was requested by me as the head for this department, and it does agree with what the mayor proposed. The increases under the wages line is based on the cost of living increases, And what I'll do is just speak to any variations in the, oh, okay. I'm sorry. So for community services, I'll just speak to the variances in some of the lines where you will see either a significant increase or decrease. And overall, for the community services budget, there are, for the line items, they pretty much lined up to what I needed for this department to run efficiently. And the difference that you'll see in, if we go down under other services, under 55 on page 127, there's a decrease that you'll see in the telephone and the cellular appropriation, and that's because we have a significant amount of grant funds for fiscal year -- that will cover the cost of any additional telephones, and so this, you'll see a decrease there of of 500 in that line, but it's covered under the grant services. There's a decrease under our dues and membership, which is 55,200, again for the same reason, because there's additional support that comes from some of the grants that we receive. And that will be pretty much the same for all of these. The decrease under community services will be because of the grants that support some of these lines. Mileage reimbursement was decreased about $500. Our conference and seminars remains the same. Printing services has decreased about 500. Let's see. Other contracted services decreased by about 2,000, but again, because of the grant support that we received for that. And on page 128 for educational supplies is decreased by 1,000 because of the grant support under, let's see here, and just a slight increase in subscriptions because of memberships. And overall, that is it for community services. Community health improvement plan, a $1,500 decrease. We actually asked for support for some of our hospitals to support the work that's done for that. And that's it for this grant. So overall, the bottom line here, the $406,510 does meet my need for the services under community services, because there's a significant amount of grant funding that will be available for fiscal year _24. It may look different for fiscal year _25, but for right now, we're pretty good for community
So
services.
that's what you presented to the mayor, and that's what he allowed,
Yes.
just to clarify, okay? Alderwoman Kelly?
You started to answer my question. My question was, well, first of all, thank you for coming in the way you did, and that you have some grant funding. That's really helpful from a perspective of the budget. I just wanted to know how many of those grants are recurring grants, or is this going to be a one-time reduction, and the next year we're going to have to find that money again?
So thank you for that question. So the grants that we currently have that are supporting the staff under community services will, most of that has come from the COVID dollars, the increase in the amount that I have for community services budget, and fiscal year '24 will be the end of that additional funding. And so in fiscal year '25, for some of the staff that I have for community services, the majority of those that are funded, the additional positions that came under the additional funds for COVID, those positions will no longer be there. So the community health workers, unless I can find underfunding from some other sources, at least 2 of those positions will no longer be at the division. Our behavioral health specialist that we have was also brought in under those funds, and so once those funds are expired, again, we'll have to find additional funding for that position as well as we have a medical assistant that's funded with these grant funds. That position, we'll need to find funding for that position. And then, let's see, I think that's it. Oh, I'm sorry. 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 And that's it.
All set? Alderman Lopez?
Just a couple of questions. First, can you tell us a little more about the CHINS program?
The CHINS?
Yep.
The CHINS is the program that we support with the Youth Council. So that is, and Bob, what's the acronym for that? I'm sorry.
Child in Need of Services.
Yes. So that's the $20,000 that we give to the Youth Council to support the services that they provide. And they have been able to expend all of that funding since we've increased that to $20,000.
But that also, if I may,
Yes.
that also represents a leveraging partnership where we're giving them $10,000, but we're benefiting from the infrastructure and the support that they offer as an organization.
Yes.
And then my other question was, there was some discussion about possibly creating a closer collaboration, I think, with community health workers and the National Police to augment their ability to respond to mental health crisis. Is that reflected here, or is that something you're still working on?
So that position is covered under the funds that we have for the COVID response. And that position will be able to fund for a year. And then after that funding is expired, then that position will have to be funded by the city.
Final question. Is there any opportunity to offer services where we'd be able to charge insurance and generate revenue?
Yes. And we are looking into that under our community health department.
Okay, thank you.
All set on community services? Dr. Bagley, next.
And you'll hear from the other 3 departments at the division. And if there's any differences in what was proposed by the department, we'll share that information this evening as well.
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Hi, good evening. Do I have to push this? No. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Good evening. My name.
Excuse me, can you introduce yourself with
Yes.
your name first? so
Yes,
it transcribes. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kim Bernard. I'm the Chief Public Health Nurse for the City of Nashua Division of Public Health and Community Services. I'm going to review the FY24 Community Health Department budget. The first page is on 130, an overview of revenue and appropriations. For revenue, there are a few areas that there are some changes, which I will address. Under event fees, we decreased. We have in the past had conferences where we get revenue from the conferences, and all of this was pre-pandemic. So we are getting back into that. So for FY24, we are anticipating to have a smaller scale conference. So that's why the revenue there is less. We have a new line, prescription drug rebates, and that is in line with our new HIV PrEP program, which is prophylaxis for folks that are high risk for developing HIV. And we just rolled this program out in February through our sexual wellness program. We have joined with a partnership with a pharmacy that will do all of the billing for us and also helps us find money for folks that do not have insurance and can't afford the drug. So we have a very loose budget here. We are anticipating at least $10,000 from that prescription drug rebate program that we can use within our programming moving forward. And then our Medicare reimbursements, we increased that because, as Bobby had alluded to, we are starting to charge more under Medicare, and we're learning how to charge under Medicaid. We have, if you remember from, I believe, last year or the year before, we started with an electronic medical record, or an EMR, and we are able to bill through that medical record, and we're currently training to do so. So what we will be doing is retroactively adding all of our flu, for an administration fee, not for the flu vaccine, but we are able to charge that to Medicare. So we will be getting some revenue from there, and then we're anticipating the Medicaid as well. And there are other things that we'll be able to put in for reimbursement for as well. Under appropriations, you'll see the biggest change here is under salaries and wages, number 51, from 451,065 to 493,592. And that is in line with the step increases that staff will be getting this year. And pretty much everything else is pretty consistent. All right, so moving on to appropriation detail, which is page 131. I'll go through and talk about the changes here. Under 51, salaries and wages, we discussed the salary. Overtime, we did not have any funds under that, and we do have some staff. Most of our staff are salaried, but we do have a few staff, some community health workers, and an administrative assistant that are sometimes here after hours, depending upon what times our clinics get out. So it's difficult to schedule, and there is some overtime. And under fringe benefits, about the same. Property services, we are seeing an increase in prices for both our disposal services and our security services. So we've increased both of those lines to absorb the increases. And also under our security services, we added a buffer for service calls, because we're finding that we've had a few service calls for our vaccine fridges, and it's really important that we make sure that we have a cold chain in place for those vaccines. Equipment and repairs, let's see. Decreased our vehicle repairs and maintenance. We had some planned maintenance for FY23, so we'll be utilizing that, and we don't anticipate that we'll need many repairs, but we do want to have some money in that line just in case this is for our mobile health van. Under other services, telephone, cellular, we decreased that. We also in community health have grant funds that support the programming that we do. So we're able to utilize some of the grant funding for telephone and cellular telephones. Mileage reimbursement, same reasoning. We've decreased that in half. Seminars and conferences, we have decreased that somewhat. We do have some grant funding so that we can utilize that for any conferences and seminars. We want to make sure that we have education available for our staff. We do have most of our staff are licensed or registered in the medical field, so we need to make sure that those CEUs are available for them. Let's see. Same with employee training and certifications. We can put seminars under that, but for anything else, we use the conference and seminars line. And other contracted services, that has to do with our electronic medical record and the fees that were charged for that, as well as our contract with Dr. Granock, who is our medical director. Next section is supplies and materials, number 61. Protective clothing, we increased somewhat because we do have some grant funds, but some of those are quite restrictive. So if we need to purchase anything protective clothing for safety for our staff, we utilize that line. Educational supplies, we have a lot of funding in our grant, and several of our grants for educational supplies. So, and a lot of those we can get at either a low cost or no cost, so we didn't need that high of a line this year. Medical supplies as well, we decreased in that line as well. Vaccines we increased. Vaccines are more expensive. Each year we're seeing an increase. in the cost of those, and also medications that we purchase for sexual wellness clinics. Miscellaneous supplies, we increased to 1,000. This is a catch-all for anything that we don't have a line for, and we utilize that line. Let's see, next page, supplies and materials, or publications. We decreased that line. We have, we use that line just to make sure that we update any outdated items, you know, such as books, nursing books or medical-related books that we need. And then program expenses, that is the line that goes along with our new program, the sexual wellness program for HIV PrEP. So the amount that was proposed was $712,699, and that is what the mayor proposed as well. And that number is consistent with what we'll need to run the department efficiently.
Any questions for community health? Yes, Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. Two questions. First, on the expense side. The indirect cost allocation is down $42,100. If I missed that, I apologize. What's behind that?
Would you like me to speak to that, Bobby?
Yes, please.
Okay. So indirect costs have to do with our grants, and correct me if I'm wrong, but with the overhead that is put into the completion of our grants, and that is something that is figured out by our finance director.
So that's essentially administrative work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just to follow up, please.
Yes.
On the revenue side, the prescription drug rebate plus $10,000, is that a federal program?
No.
That's, okay. Where does that come from? Is that state driven?
The program, it's a private pharmacy that we have a contract with.
Oh, okay.
They're a 430B pharmacy, and what will happen is whatever the difference between the insurance and the cost of the medication, and what the fee that they charge, then that money comes back to us, where we can put that money back into our program. So for example, if we have a client that cannot afford to have some of the testing done that we require prior to prescribing HIV PrEP, and also with our clients that receive HIV PrEP, they have to come every 3 months for either education or testing or both. And sometimes there's a cost that is associated with those tests, and then that way we have money to cover those tests.
Very good.
Or the medication.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderman Jennings?
Thank you. So kind of along that same line, we hear about, the manufacturers of opioid drugs, having been sued and, paying lots of money in settlement. Is any of that money filtering down to you for opioid treatment, or?
I'll defer to Bobby for that question,
Yes,
if I may.
Yes,
ahead.
thank you. Thank you for that question. So the opioid abatement trust fund has been set up under the city of Nashua and comes through and is dispersed through the mayor's office. When that funding does come in, our Division of Public Health and Community Services works very closely with the mayor's task force for substance use disorder to disperse that funding when it comes in. Nashua is named as one of the 23 subdivisions that are a part of that large settlement. And so over the next 18 years, we will be receiving funding through those different settlements with the pharmaceutical companies. They may come in different amounts, but the expectation is that there will be funding that comes through over the next 18 years that we will be able to use in our community to fight the opioid epidemic. It doesn't come directly to our department. It comes in through the trust that we've set up under the city of Nashua.
Okay, and from that trust, do you get any part of that?
Our division does not get any of that directly unless we also submit a proposal to the mayor for some of those funds. Right now, most of the money that we get for opioid abatement comes through our state grants that are passed through SAMHSA, which is at the federal level.
Okay. And may I continue?
Go ahead.
And so you've got under supplies and materials, vaccines/medicines, 23,000. So isn't there state or federal money? Isn't there some other source of money other than the Nashua taxpayers for COVID and flu and shingles, TB, the childhood diseases and HIV, STD, all that stuff? Isn't there some other source of money other than the Nashua taxpayers?
There is. So this covers some vaccines, and then other vaccines we do get, like all of our children's vaccines, we do get those from the state. So it does cover that, but this is just partial vaccine and medications.
So besides the 23,000 that you're asking for here, you're getting other money from someplace else
Yes.
for vaccines?
Or from the federal government, through the state.
Do you have any idea how much that is?
What's that?
Do you have any idea how much that is?
I don't, not off the top of my head, but I certainly could look into it.
Okay, but I trust you're maximizing, whatever you can get from elsewhere.
Yes, we are. And there are some barriers that are in place with who we can give vaccine to, depending on which bucket that we have. I call them buckets. We have a bucket that is for folks that are, uninsured or underinsured. There's, and sometimes we can't give vaccine to certain folks like that have insurance because we get it from a certain bucket from the state that is only set aside for people that may not have insurance. So there are some limitations, when we are with all the different vaccines that we give, because we have just about every vaccine besides travel vaccines in our clinic.
And could I ask another question? So with COVID, now that the COVID emergency order is expiring tonight.
Today.
How does that affect your ability to give COVID vaccinations?
Sure, that's a really great question. So with the end of the emergency order, we will still be getting COVID vaccine at no cost from the federal government until that supply runs out. The state has let us know, and I was actually on a call with the CDC today, that they don't anticipate that will happen for several months. They're looking maybe midsummer. And then once that happens, there's going to be commercialization of COVID vaccine. But they did say that that there will be folks that are, without insurance and people that may not have the funds to pay for a vaccine. There will be some programming for that. As far as for us in the city and the division, we do have an COVID immunization grant that we do have funds in, and we set aside funds anticipating that this commercialization would occur. So we are prepared to be able to purchase vaccine. Now, another piece of this is that the state will provide, it is actually in the immunization schedule for children. So if you are under the age of 19, you will be able to receive the COVID vaccine moving forward without an issue. It's more so for the adults, and that's where the commercialization piece will come into play.
Okay, and I think one last thing. So, I want to give you the opportunity to make a pitch for telling people that even though the emergency order is expiring, that COVID is still out there and they still ought to take advantage of,
Oh, I like you. Yes, it's very important that folks, you know, it doesn't equate, this end of the emergency order does not equate to COVID is, you know, obsolete. COVID is still around, it's still taking lives, unfortunately, and it's important that we still stay vigilant on, you know, making sure that we are practicing safe behaviors, we're washing our hands, we're staying home if we're sick, we're wearing a mask if we're sick, and getting vaccinated. There are new vaccine, there's a new vaccine schedule that's out. It's a lot easier now, it's a lot more streamlined as far as with the newer bivalent vaccine that is out now, where you get one, if you have never been vaccinated against COVID-19, you just get one vaccine and you are fully vaccinated. There are some, I won't go into all the different, the different scenarios, but with children it's different. And with other populations that may be at higher risk, such as immunocompromised folks or folks that may be over the age of 65, there are some other schedules that we would follow. Yeah, it's really important that that folks still, you know, stay up to date on their vaccines, and we offer them in our clinic. We, you know, you can call our department and get an appointment and come on down and get your COVID vaccine. We also have tests, so if anyone out there needs rapid tests, we also have a lot of tests at no cost. So people can just come in, they don't have to call, they can just come in and get them. So thank you for that.
you're welcome.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I have Alderwoman Kelly first.
I'll be brief because I think I might have answered my own question. I was looking at the HIV PrEP program that you were discussing and also the screenings and how they've doubled year after year. My question was whether that was, you know, due to a community need or increased capacity on your part. I did see that you rebranded, but.
We did rebrand.
And that you've been working pretty hard on the outreach.
Yes, we have been. And you know, it's sometimes it's hard to interpret the data because of what we have seen over the pandemic too. So we are seeing, and this is a nationwide issue, is we are seeing an increase in STDs. And we are seeing an increase of folks that are at higher risk that are coming to see us. So when I think that may have something to do with the numbers, because if they're higher risk, we're gonna be testing for things that we would test high risk folks for. So then in turn, we might have more positive tests. So yeah. Did that answer your question?
It did.
Okay, great.
That's it. Alderman Lopez.
So first, I am greatly looking forward to the commercialization of the COVID vaccine. I don't think anything can go wrong with that. It went really well for people with diabetes, and I know the space program is better than ever. Starship fell out of the sky like 2 weeks ago. So I see that as a potential issue, and I want to echo Alderman Jettie and Nurse Bernard's comments that people, if you can get vaccinated, you should take advantage of these. That has a direct impact on how Nashua experiences these different crises. I wanted to talk a little bit or confirm a little bit about the different types of things that you vaccinate against. There's community impact to be considered, as well as just like what are Nashua taxpayers getting for free. So, I mean, I don't think it takes a genius to realize that a big flu outbreak in our schools might impact, you know, staffing and, you know, sick and overtime and, you know, children being exposed to things and having a number of safety issues. But some of the things that we briefly touched upon, such as the increases in STDs, those aren't just like recreational faux pas. Those have long-term debilitating effects as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
So I just think it's important to highlight that while the health department does try to get as many grants and funding sources outside the Nashua taxpayers' tax base, we do benefit from the money that's spent. Like, I think very much exponentially, because we don't put that much of our budget into community health. I have long argued we could put more, and I think we get way more out of the money that we put in than we do in a lot of other areas. It just doesn't get the same kind of attention and the same kind of visibility, because if you're successful in public health, then there isn't a crisis and there isn't a call to action. It's where there's those stumbles and, miscommunications and failures to prevent that we really start to struggle. Is it covered under your department to talk about Lyme in the community and efforts to prevent, or is that more going to be environmental health?
It would be, they would be the experts, environmental health would be the experts. It isn't a reportable disease any longer for the state of New Hampshire, so we don't do disease investigations surrounding Lyme.
Okay, I'll hold my questions for that.
So environmental health?
Oh,
Tell us about the rodents.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing the book.
Good evening. My name is Heidi P. Kokoka. I am Nashua's health officer. And I am here to talk about the Environmental Health Department's budget. And I'd like to start off, I've got my notes on another page, so just bear with me. With our revenues on page 135. And a couple of explanations. Pool licenses expired at the end of April, and we are now processing a lot of those licenses. So you will see that that number was low as of the 31st of March. But that should pick up, and a lot of people really don't think of their pool licenses, the outdoors specifically, until Memorial Day. Our food service revenues have increased dramatically since we increased our fees. Thanks to board members for support and some guidance on that. We forecast for $175,000, and that looked like an awful lot of money, but at today's date, I went into Lawson and checked, and we have received $150,000 in revenues. And I think the fee structure is more equitable. I think it will certainly help the sustainability of the department, but it also offers lessening of a burden to the taxpayers. So I appreciate the support on that. We are also looking next at our spa and pool licenses. So you'll see those come to you for ordinance changes sometime in the near future, as well as our septic license fees. And our solid waste hauler licenses, those expire at the end of June. They're going to be mailed out next week. And the rest are fairly minor. Violation revenue, we may actually end up bringing more than I expected. We are finding that ticketing is very effective in motivating people who are not otherwise motivated when it comes to correcting things in food service facilities. We look at it as a last resort prior to license suspension, but we're finding that it garners a lot of respect. And that's it for revenues. Do I wait for questions on revenues, or?
Anyone want to ask a question on the revenue before we get into appropriations? Or Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, so what's the solid waste license?
Those are the solid waste haulers who come through town and use the landfill. We license them.
Okay, that's not done by the Department of Public Works?
It is as well. But we're able to, say for instance, on a main road in Nashua, one time we had all the trash from a dentist's office spilling out in front of a school. And we had because we licensed the company, we had the authority to say, come down, clean it up, pick it up. So it's more about what happens out in the community than within the landfill.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. I was just curious to know how much a health violation was. How much is the ticket?
It varies on the severity of what it is. I think the most recent one that we issued the last couple of days was operating without a license, and I think the first offense is $100. And then I think it's typically, it's tiered so that it's a 3-step process. They go up incrementally. And for that one, that requires a court date at the end of that cycle. Some of the other ones for more minor violations, and these were written for our, what we call our critical violations, those that have a direct effect on the public's health. So that's what we chose for ticketing.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
Appropriations?
Okay. For our appropriations, one thing I wanted to mention is that we actually did request more money for our wages. It's a difference of about $3,000. We asked to have reassessment done of a position. She's had a variety of titles in the department. She is currently office manager / environmental health tech. And that was rejected. That request was rejected. But her job description is about 21 years old. And I still think it was a reasonable request. Yes, and there were additional duties assigned, and because with the changes in software, with the changes in our billing process, she's often viewed as an admin. She is not an admin. She, the title we were looking at was business manager. And she actually serves as the third person within the department if the health officer and the deputy health officer are not available. And she assigns the majority of the work and does a lot of hand-holding with our business community. And if we had to go hire somebody brand new, we'd probably be paying them a lot more money. So I'll go through the other things where there have been changes. We have asked for and received $4,000 for overtime. One of the things, and you can see that we've spent a little over $6,000 so far. We asked HR about a comp time policy, and they figured that out for us. And so for a couple of people, comp time is attractive for them. And so we're offsetting that a little bit. And so we're pretty confident with the $4,000. The next line that has gone up would be under consulting services. This is for drag mosquito, for our mosquito surveillance. And this is increased based on the cost of fuel. All of what they do in the field has to be done on a cold chain with mosquito collections. And so dry ice has become very expensive, and that's for staffing costs as well. And we went down a little bit for telephone cellular. And then we increased our mileage reimbursements a little bit because one of our city vehicles was totaled, and we are using, we're sharing people will use their own vehicle when they have a specific route that they're working. And conferences and seminars, for us, a lot of our conferences and seminars have been free or reduced for us because a lot of them are from the federal government. I'm sure that that will change in the future, but I'm confident that we can probably get through this next year with less money. And then we added back a line for protective clothing. We're asking for a nominal amount for $400 in there. We do messy jobs, and it's nice to offer staff something that they can wash. But it's also, there is a trend where people will pretend to be inspectors going into food service facilities. And so having the city seal and being immediately recognized on a piece of clothing is very helpful. And then miscellaneous supplies, we added a little bit. And as Kim had mentioned, this is a catch-all for us as well. We've bought safety equipment, we've bought the documents for licenses when they weren't available before. We go through this sometimes pretty quickly. And that is about it.
Questions? Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, so you said that you had asked for an increase for one of your employees, and so how would that increase salaries and wages? How much more are you looking for?
$3,046.
And so do you know what that would raise your requested amount to?
4,000, my math skills are horrible. So I believe that what we had requested was 450,585.
Okay, it says 452,777 under total 51.
Oh, you're doing the total? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So it would be an additional $3,046.
So it's an additional 3,000 to wages full-time?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
All set?
Thank you.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Along those same lines, for employees, I found it in the back of the book. You have 6 full-time employees, correct?
We do.
Okay. Now granted, I don't know if you've looked at this or not, but it says here that with all of those salaries added in, you're at $447,539. Does that include overtime?
No, it does not. Because the people who collect overtime are hourly, and there is the line for overtime.
I think I just figured it out. That number must include benefits.
Benefits, yeah. That's total.
That's me thinking out loud. Thanks.
Any other questions? Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, through you to Alderman Sullivan, where in the back of the book did you?
Well,
Page?
252.
This year, we added the staffing levels for every single division and department, so that you'd have that info. And the salaries reflected are the total salaries.
Okay, thank you, yeah. We're all struggling with this new book.
I just got it today too, so.
PDF.
Any other questions?
Yeah, individually, posted out.
Okay, so that covers environmental health, so welfare administration.
I think, good evening, Bob Mack, Welfare Officer for the City of Nashua. I believe we start on page 139. I believe.
Yes.
Tell you in a minute.
Yes.
You're correct.
You did.
Yeah,
I did some math in my head, and figured out what. So starting with the revenues for the department, we have minimal revenues that we collect basically through personal reimbursements of clients. And we do collect some reimbursements if we have liens against real properties, if we've assisted people that own property, and if they ever do anything, refinance or sell that property, we get some reimbursement through any of those liens. Occasionally, what happens primarily with personal reimbursements is clients may apply to us because, let's say, their utility was disconnected. They have $200 to pay towards the utility, but the utility company wants $500. We're able to call the utility company, assist them with a lesser amount, say $150, and so we will make that payment, help them get into a payment arrangement, and they will reimburse us that amount of money, which is less than what they would have had to pay initially. So it's kind of a win-win situation for them to be able to get into a reasonable payment plan. So those are just a couple of the ways we get reimbursements. We don't see a lot of them, and they're kind of hard to predict. So I don't know if there are any questions on that.
I think it's pretty simple. We're going to appropriations.
Yeah. Thank you. Appropriations, so there aren't any real significant changes there. The salaries fall in line with the salary grid. We are a department of 5 staff people that are fully funded by the city. We are fully staffed at this point. Moving down into some of the other lines, the only real change, we did make an adjustment to the mileage as we move back to in-person meetings and conferences and trainings. We're just having more travel, whether it's meetings within the community or frequently to Concord for some trainings and various meetings. So there weren't any real significant changes there. And I don't know if there are any questions or specific.
Any questions on revenue appropriations? Alderman Jettie?
Yes, thank you. So under revenues, you have sale of software, 12,500. Oh, what's that for?
Yes, I'm sorry. That was a bit of a surprise. We developed a software. We purchased a software system years ago when the old VAX admin system was not working. Some people remember that system. And so that wasn't working. I think environmental health may still use that part of that system. I don't know. No, I think you finally moved away from that.
We miss it.
But so we had purchased a system from another community. Through our IT department, they did some enhancements, reworked it, changed it, did what IT does, stuff that goes well over my head, but they created a very workable, usable system for us. We had another community approach us about what we were using, and they ended up purchasing that system from us. So I was actually kind of surprised that we got some credit for that. I thought it would just go to IT. But so that's it. I guess if I go out and market the system, maybe we'll generate more revenue.
Follow-up, Alderman Jettie?
Yes. So, you know, when I go back a long time ago, when I first started practicing law, I was a legal aid attorney here in Nashua. And I kind of recall that the state law required, you know, cities and towns to provide welfare assistance whenever it was needed. So is that still true? I mean, you if somebody's in real need, you've got to help them by law, right?
Yes.
You can't say, well, I've run out of money, I can't help you. So if there's a surge in need, you would have to come back to us, I guess, say, I need more money, and the state law requires that you fulfill that need. Am I correct about that?
Yes,
If I may?
it's the next subject if we want to jump into welfare assistance, because this was just the welfare
Sure.
administration.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry.
that's okay. If you'd like me to, oh, I'm sorry.
Any other questions on welfare administration? Yes, Alderman Kelly.
Mine's assistance, so I'll hold.
Any others? All right, welfare assistance.
Okay, thank you. To answer your question, Alderman Jettie, yes, that is the requirement of RSA 165, that municipalities must provide this general assistance to those that are eligible. We, unlike some other organizations or charitable foundations or what have you, if they do not have money, they may be able to say, unfortunately, we can't help you, we don't have that money. The municipalities cannot do that under the statute, so, and I won't go into the history of 20 some odd years ago, but with the welfare general assistance, there were a couple iterations of this budget and the requests, initially requesting a little more, and then in evaluating what we have as an expendable welfare trust. We have a substantial amount of money in that, about $385,000. As you may have seen from the monthly reports that are sent to the board, the last report through April, we had spent about 95% of our general assistance budget. At this date, we've pretty much spent our budget for the year, and so we will be looking to tap into that expendable trust fund, projecting, maybe $50,000 to $60,000 to get to the end of the year that we may be over budget. So we would tap into that fund, which would bring that down to about $320,000, give or take. Keeping that in mind, the proposal here in the budget book to level fund the general assistance would take into account that if we exhaust that money, if we keep on the current run rate of what we're spending of about $41,000 a month, that would put us around $500,000 or so for the year. Even with the tapping into the welfare expendable trust this current fiscal year, we'd still have about $300,000 to $320,000 in that fund that we would then tap into. The only thing we can use the fund for is to make up for overages in the general assistance budget. So that is part of this proposal here. And again, Alderman Jettie, as you said, we can't say we don't have the money, so we can't assist you, but we do have that fund that we can tap into.
Questions? Alderwoman Kelly?
Thank you, and you beat me a bit to the punch, because I was gonna ask around the fact that it looks like you pretty much expended your budget for this year. I'm assuming that's around some of the COVID money expiring and people have more assistance because that ended?
Yes,
Okay.
that and the cost of rents increasing
We're working with
15
them
to
on this.
30% over the last year or so. And again, we're kind of hoping that a lot of the development that's going on in the community with housing units might help to bring that down a bit. So.
Yeah, hopefully, for sure. So it sounded like what you were going to use for the shortfall this year would be the welfare trust fund. Given the numbers you said, we'd also have to take another 150 out next year. Is that about correct? Looks like it's about that short.
For anywhere from 85,000 to 150,000. In some ways, it's hard to predict until you're kind of into it. It depends on changes in the economy, again, the housing market, what the impact may be of all the construction that's taking place in the city. If there are any other programs, I mean, one of the things that we focus a lot on, our staff focus on, is connecting people to other resources. So some recent efforts have actually generated some additional housing choice vouchers for youth that are experiencing homelessness. So some of those efforts, in conjunction with the United Way and the National Housing and Redevelopment Authority and DCYF, have created some of those opportunities. But similar to other grants and other programs across the division and across the city, some of them come and go. And so you never really know how long they're gonna be around or how they may work out.
I could follow up.
Follow up?
Thank you. You may not know the answer, but I'm wondering if we know how that welfare trust fund is funded.
Yes, the Welfare Trust Fund, if I may, was established, as I understand it, back in 1997. When I first became employed with the city, there was about $16,000 in it. And at that point, we were about $400,000 or $500,000 overspent in the general assistance budget. So that $16,000 didn't do very much at that point. So we had to budget accordingly over the years. And as we budgeted, as things shifted in the economy, we would have a higher general assistance budget. Over time, as we brought on more staff, we did more leveraging, accessing community resources, et cetera. As we started to underspend, so in like 2003, 2004, we were actually able to take some of the money that we did not spend in the general assistance budget. So in 2004, I think it was, we put $100,000 into that fund. And then in 2005, another $200,000 into that fund. So it got it up to a reasonable amount. And then however it accrues interest and such, it got up to this 380.85 that it's at today.
All set?
I just wanted to clarify. So what you're saying is that there's no consistent funding. It's just if you're underspent, you can throw money in there and that's pretty much how it gets funded.
Yeah, I think there was a goal to get it to a certain point so that there would be a reasonable amount as a backup in case we needed it.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Jettie, then Alderman Wiltshire.
Yeah, so if you're saying that you expect to spend around 500,000, does it really make sense to only budget 415?
That's a very good question, Alderman Jay. That is some of the communications around how to budget for the general assistance initially involved increasing the general assistance budget. Follow-up conversations were around utilizing the trust. Because again, even if we go over, which most likely it will, we still have a significant amount of money in that trust. So we should not be running a great risk of running out of money for general assistance, if that makes sense.
And what's the reference, the number for that trust fund? Does anybody know?
That I do not
Yeah, I
know.
have it right here. It's on page 242. It's fund number 7042. God bless you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All set? Alderman Wiltshire?
I always have to mention how proud I am of the work that Mr. Mack has done over the years. Like, I was here on the board when he started, and he has just overhauled this department. It's amazing what a difference he's made. And I'm gonna sing that song every time, because I really believe that you do a great job. Welfare assistance is like crime and snow, unpredictable. You don't know how much you're gonna have, how much you're gonna need, because, you know, it could snow 20 times in the winter, it could snow twice. So I look at it that way, but I think he does a fabulous job. I think you run a good department, and I always appreciate you, so thank you.
Alderman Lopez?
I have a very similar tradition to President Wiltshire, saying I cannot believe we're not asking for more money because of what I see happening on the ground. And I would point out that Director Mack has a very long history, as long as I've been alderman and longer, of managing the welfare department. And I think if he's suggesting that it might be wise to add to that department, that might be something that we'd want to consider. Given it's the first time that I've actually heard him say he's willing to accept more money, I would support it. towards the end and try an amendment, I would also point out that the whole board has to agree, and it would be in the context of after we do the whole budget. But I think it does alarm me that we don't have a consistent funding mechanism for the general assistance fund beyond using the endowment fund, and that its funding in the past has been essentially the function of windfalls. It doesn't sound like that happens on an ongoing basis. The last examples were given over 10 years ago. So I think I would like to see some kind of forecasting to see what we can reliably expect for future years, because I don't want to leave it to 2026 and 2027 people to suddenly have a budgetary issue where they have to decide whether they're going to, how they're going to fund the general assistance fund. I think that's something we should probably be looking at today. I do note that all of the partners that we have as a city are expanding their program for the most part. I know a couple of years ago, Harbor Homes closed Maple Street. I was there, and that was a decrease, but that wasn't due to lack of occupation by any means. And we're looking at programs like National Soup Kitchen investing significant amounts of revenue in expansion, and programs like Stepping Stones being conceived and invented because the sense is that there isn't enough being done in those areas. So I definitely recognize that Director Mack's strategic leveraging of resources has done a lot for the city. And I think that's where President Wilshire and I definitely agree that taxpayers get a very good bargain for the amount of work that city welfare does to corral all of the different well-meaning agencies that otherwise, you know, even in my initial workings with them, weren't coordinating or collaborating with each other quite so well. And that does definitely speak to Director Mack's participation, because I think at some point he was chairing everything in the continuum of care, just trying to keep people coordinating, collaborating, and working together. So I don't want my comments to be taken as any kind of criticism of his performance, more to the effect that he, I think, has a more steady hand when it comes to this kind of stuff than I do. And my sense would be we should be putting more resources in earlier. And if he's suggesting that we might need to start thinking on those lines, then I'm definitely listening. So with all of that being said, and with Alderman Jetty's comments about anybody who's eligible not being unable to receive assistance, we did review the welfare guidelines a couple of years ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if there is another agency that can pay for something or can provide resources, that's our default setting, is we would forward people to them. And if a person doesn't meet eligibility criteria, for example, having received services previously under certain conditions, those are not considered people who receive resources. Is that correct, or do you want to clarify?
Yes, that's accurate. We do leverage resources in the community, refer to other programs. Other programs do also refer to us. They want us to do an initial assessment in many cases. And there are occasions where people that have received assistance, if they do not comply with our guidelines, may not be eligible for assistance.
So while I respect the guidelines, and I understand, believe me, firsthand, how they came about, my belief that overall the people in need of welfare assistance is expanding is also informed by the opinions of Department of Public Works, for example, that there's a lot more need for community campsite cleanups. And we've been doing a lot more organizing to get multiple organizations together to do homeless outreach and coordinate and collaborate care. And I've been doing a lot more literal picking up of trash, like a couple by the dozen bags cleanups at this point that I've been getting local like Ace Hardware to donate bags for. And I've been coordinating with the Public Works to try to help at least ease a little bit of it. When we have people who are not housed, and when we have people that are in need of assistance and they don't get it on the onsite, it still costs our city in other areas, and we do see the impacts. I think I am not the only alderman who's had a lot more calls from constituents lately. And we all are fully aware of the things that are going on in Manchester and regionally when it comes to that. We haven't had a crisis here in Nashua in terms of large numbers of people establishing campsites and us not being able to dislodge them. But that doesn't mean that if we aren't vigilant with how we support our welfare office and the organizations that partner with it, that we wouldn't. So those are things that I'm concerned about. I trust Director Mack's presentation of the budget. I trust the mayor's general oversight that he's not looking to like have a homeless crisis in his next election year or anything like that. But I wouldn't let this meeting pass without saying we need to be very, very conscious of this. And I echo Alderman Kelly's concerns about the trust fund. I think it might be a good idea to start looking at how to plan that deliberately and see if either there's a consistent revenue source, or at least if we could have somebody assess that financially and say, based on trending, this is where we should start hitting the panic button and saying, okay, politics can't get in the way of this. We do need to start adding funding or we're gonna hit a problem.
Okay, any last minute questions for Public Health and Community Service? Alderwoman Kelly?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, when we're looking at assistance shelter, that is like emergency shelter when we tend to cover like motel fees and that kind of thing? It's not like we're covering rent, is that true?
Actually, that line does include rental costs. It's
Okay.
just been designated as a shelter line. It does also cover emergency motel costs.
Okay.
The bulk of that line is prevention and rental assistance to prevent evictions.
Okay.
All
Because
set?
my follow-up question was going to be, as we see more units come on board, which we've been working on really hard, is that gonna bring that number down? But if it's current rental assistance, not necessarily. Is that true?
That could be correct, yes.
Okay. Okay. Maybe.
Yes, Alderman O'Brien?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could take a step back to Heidi, and you made a suggestion to look for more money for that particular employee. I would assume that that employee is at the top of the matrix within her grade.
Yes.
So therefore, there's no recalculation on the matrix to accommodate her?
No,
Yeah.
not at the current grade level.
Okay.
Okay. All set? Yes.
Thank you for indulgence, Chair Endowed. One more question to Director Mack, just because I feel like it should be aired. I can see that this might be not viable, but the idea crossed my mind, what about creating a bucket or a mechanism to accept sponsors to augment our welfare assistance fund, to see if people would be willing to invest or corporations would be willing to donate funds. Do we have any partners that are actually doing that? Because we had a community asset coalition for a while.
Well, I think with the general assistance fund being a mandated fund through the state statute, I mean, I think there are some smaller communities that have small buckets of different grants and whatnot. But most of those grant funds in our community go to agencies and other organizations. So I might suggest that we focus on those agencies receiving that money and partnering with those agencies to allow them to administer some of the programs to supplement what we may not be able to assist with, if that makes sense. Because
That's your current strategy, so I get that.
Well, as was mentioned, some people don't qualify for our assistance, or they can only get a portion of what they may need. And we often leverage that assistance by connecting them to these other resources that may have more flexibility, because they have different guidelines or just a different structure. So if that makes sense. But it's something we could absolutely look at and look into further, to explore different avenues.
At least just to identify if there's like a emergency Red Cross fund somewhere or something, so that if we did run into that area that I'm concerned about, that we wouldn't have to tank.
All set? Alderman Wiltshire?
I don't know if it's coincidence, but it's Nurses Week. And I just wanted to thank the nurses in the room for all their work and appreciate everything you do, so.
Always overworked and underpaid.
Right.
All right, Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make the motion to table R23-125, which is the budget.
The motion on the floor is to table R23-125. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. General discussion? Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, since Ms. Bagley is here, you had requested a couple of Ford Escapes, I think, for your department.
Yes, for
And,
environmental health.
With, through the finance and they tabled it to look at EVs. What was the result of that? Has that been resolved?
That, well, the goal is to get 2 electric vehicles, and I believe there's been some progress that's been made with that, with getting the
Yeah.
electric bolts.
Yes, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
It's gone out to bid for a total of 3 electric vehicles, 2 of which are for environmental health, and I believe the other one is for transit.
Oh, good. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Alderman O'Brien?
Yeah, now that you mentioned the electric vehicles, is your building, I know we spent money to upgrade it, can you handle that? Is there gonna be additional infrastructure costs to charge up these particular vehicles? You'll have to come back to the board in the future?
I don't know.
We don't.
Yeah. Okay.
So, that's another story for another
True.
day.
If I could.
There's another day? Alderman Kelly?
Thank you so much, Alderman Dowd. I just would say that it has come up in energy environment, and that has been one of the things we're talking about, is how do we make sure that we scale up for infrastructure, for things like that. So it's being discussed. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we just added 5
Yeah.
at the Public Works Building, and we have put in the capability to add charging stations at the McCarthy School, I think up to 20. But you have to make sure that you have the power capability to power those. And sometimes it requires a new circuit breaker or even a transformer. So, but I am sure Dory Brown will look into that. All right. So next is no public comment. Remarks by Alderman. All right, oh, Alderman Sullivan.
Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey,
That's nice.
I miss my mom.
Alderwoman Kelly?
I just wanted to thank you for the budget layout with your, I've never done it this way, and I really do like the clipping, being able to move things around, and
Oh, I had to twist arms to get this.
I appreciate that. It's very nice. I'm gonna get nerdy and color code things.
Yeah. I just thought of it tonight. I wish we'd given all the division directors 3-ring binders rather
So they
than
can
that
follow along.
pressed book.
Next year.
But they'd probably still be waiting for them. But anyway,
Yeah.
all right. Motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to make the motion to adjourn.
Motion on the floor is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 9:12. Thank you, everyone.
I'm gonna stay here all night.
Yeah.
This has been exciting.
Nice seeing you.